Hey, welcome from Stockholm. I wanted to do a quick roundup, a personal roundup of 2023. It's just in the run up to Christmas. I'm not sure whether this video will come out before Christmas or in the run up to the new year. I was going to video this out in Stockholm, but the temperatures here this week have been about -12 with a northerly wind which takes it down even further, and that is beyond my operating capabilities and probably beyond the operating capabilities for using batteries and the like out in that kind of cold. So I've reverted to my plan B, which is back here in my hotel room. Luckily it's a hotel room that has about 12 different spotlights that you can angle around. So hopefully the lighting's not too bad. It is quite a confined space. So thinking back through 2023, there's been a lot of progress around the Nikon Z series ecosystem. For me, it has been, I'll break it down into the 4 quarters probably, because they each have different things that have gone on. I started the year actually getting back into a bit more travel. My first travel post-COVID or post-pandemic was back in the spring of 2022. And it was obvious then that there was still a lot of regulations and restrictions in place, which made it quite difficult. So I didn't really start traveling again until the end of 2022 and then the beginning of 2023. So in the first quarter, I travelled a bit in Europe. I'd had a trip to the US, either on photography or other business, where I managed to do some photography as well. And it was great to use my Z7 and my Z6 to get back into some travel photography. Equally, what I was finding is that you have to consider the digital ecosystem increasingly, and Lightroom or Adobe with their Lightroom product had expanded the capabilities, particularly with things like noise reduction, which is great when you're shooting in low light environments and there's that little bit of noise. Actually, Lightroom is now really good at taking that noise out of images, which expands the operating capabilities, that envelope, that performance envelope of the Nikon Z series and other cameras. So that was really quarter one. It was really about getting back into, the production of images, videos and photography. So quarter two was an interesting time for me. I wasn't planning on upgrading any of my kit at that point. However, Nikon announced and launched the Z8. And for me, the specs were interesting, but it wasn't necessarily the specs they weren't that different that they were going to push me into buying. I got invited to a Nikon event that was showcasing primarily the Z8, but had every body and lens combination that you could try. And actually, for me, it was about how the Z8 felt in my hand. And as I've said in my previous videos, it really is back to that D850 kind of feel in your hand. And the spec uplifts and the ergonomics really nudged me over the line into putting down a deposit for a Z8. I put my deposit down, and the next day Nikon announced the first service recall, which put a slight delay in the delivery timescales, but it meant I got a camera that wasn't involved in that first service recall, and I could take it on a trip I had planned to New York, where I really could put it through its paces. On the service advisories, obviously Nikon had 2 on the Z8, however, I was really impressed with how Nikon handled it. Certainly in the UK, I registered my camera, needed the second recall, and about a month, 6 weeks later, I got an email saying, we're ready for your camera, when would you like to have it picked up? It got picked up on a Tuesday, and it was back with me on the Friday. And they'd done both service advisories, even though one wasn't required. So really well handled, and kudos to Nikon. All of the hype around that peaked and died away quite quickly. They handled that really well, and it's what you expect from a high-end product, I guess, like the Nikon Z8. Interestingly, at that Nikon event, I did get to try the 180-600 zoom, which had been announced that day. And it's a great lens from my limited experience with it at that event. I do a lot of travel, and a lens of that size, you've got to have a use for it, to carry it. Because one of the things with the Z8 that I've talked about is the weight penalty versus a Z6 and a Z7, and a size penalty. It's only small, but it does make a difference. It's better in the hand, but when you're actually having to carry it and fit it into camera bags, when you combine it with, say, a 24-70 f2.8 lens or a 70-200 f2.8 lens, it does become quite a large camera lens combination. So when it got to Q3, I wasn't looking at extending my kit that much, but the one area that I felt I could really benefit from is a smaller, lighter lens to go with the Z8, to allow me to use it in some more street type environments. So if you look back through my videos, I ended up with the 28mm f2.8 Z lens, which is really light. Okay, it's only got a plastic mount. I say only, to me that isn't a problem. The optics in it are really good, and when you put it on the Z8, it really brings the size and weight of the Z8 down to something that's really great if you just want to pick up a camera and travel with it. I've tended to travel recently with either my 24-70 f2.8, my 24-70 f4, and that 28mm f2.8. The f2.8 gives you that edge, which is great when you're in somewhere like Stockholm, where the sun doesn't come up until gone 9 in the morning and it goes down at 2:30 in the afternoon. You're really challenged to do really low light and no light photography, and when you're in a street situation, it's really challenges you in a different way, which brings me back, I guess, in Q4. I've been really focusing on what is the performance envelope with the Z8, the lenses I've got, and then when you look at the post-production tools that we've got in the Adobe, for me, the Adobe suite of software, which with generative AI has been developing quite considerably. In Q4, Adobe announced a slight change to their pricing methodology, where you have credits now as well as a monthly subscription. But hopefully, from looking at their showcase of future technologies, there's some really interesting generative AI driven capabilities that will come out. So I think 2024 is going to be really interesting. I'll do a separate video on where I think different things are going, but increasingly we've got to think about that digital ecosystem. I'm going to be really interested to see how some of the shots I took here in Stockholm come out, because actually I tested the camera a little bit and let the ISO drift up to around 16,000, if not higher, in a couple of situations. So it'll be interesting to see how much noise there is, how good is the sensor in the Z8, but then what can I do with Adobe Lightroom or Adobe Photoshop to really dial out any noise in post-production. So I guess that's my 2023. It's only a quick video. I thought I'd just get one down, and what I really wanted to say is thank you so much for being on my journey during 2023, for the support that you've all given. I wish you and your families all the best during this festive season. I hope you get some time to go out and shoot some great images, and I really look forward to having you on the journey in 2024.